this narrative and also de-hyphenate India and Pakistan, which is what our foreign policy has attempted to do over the last 25 years. At a time such as this, the Congress led by Rahul Gandhi has been trying to poke holes in the official narrative around Operation Sindoor. But senior leaders in the Congress party itself are not entirely in agreement. In private, they are saying that this is actually a zero-sum game, that the Congress party is not reading the mood of the nation. Whether it is a Shashi Tharoor who's been chosen to head the delegation that goes to the United States, a Salman Khurshid is also going along with one of the delegations, and now even former Home Minister P. Chidambaram, all seem to be suggesting that this is a moment that calls for national, if not political unity, because the country has to present a united face, particularly at a time when India has to do the hard yards, to go the extra mile to recapture some of the global narrative, to try and de-hyphenate, as I said, India and Pakistan yet again. Let's first bring you a snapshot of all the various political reactions that have been coming in and whether or not the Congress party is missing the mood on the street, as it were.
ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಈಗೇನು ನಾವು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಚುಟ್ಪುಟ್ಟು ಯುದ್ಧಗಳು ನಡೆದಿವೆ ಅಥವಾ ನಮ್ಮ ಪಾಕಿಸ್ತಾನ ವಿರುದ್ಧ नावेनी घर्षणे मारता इದ್ದೇವೆ.
अगर इस एक्टिविटी का जानी माली नुकसान हुआ वो किसको हुआ? एक एक्टिविटी ने इस वक्त जम्मू कश्मीर में घर बिठा दिया.
अभी तो चाइना मेड 5000 ड्रोन उन्होंने भेजा, वो चाइना के थे. उस ड्रोन की कीमत 15,000 है, उसमें कुछ नहीं होता है. उसके लिए हमने 15 लाख का मिसाइल की कीमत 15 लाख थी एक ड्रोन गिराने के लिए, वो 15,000 का ड्रोन.
Now, those are some of the dissonant voices in the Congress party. Not all of them necessarily are in agreement with the leadership and this line of argument or attack against the government of the day, as it were. Shashi Tharoor, for example, he was one of the first ones to break ranks with the Congress's official narrative. His praise for Operation Sindoor, saying that the name was well thought out, stirred a hornet's nest. He called the strike calibrated and very calculated. Under fire from his own party, Dr. Tharoor doubled down. He defended his comments. He said it was intended to contribute to the national discourse, particularly at a time when India's position needed stronger articulation on the global stage. And perhaps that's why the government also had the foresight to choose him as the person who will lead the delegation that goes to the United States. Salman Khurshid, former Minister for External Affairs, he in fact came down to our studios. He had an exclusive interview with CNN News 18. He said that while the government should inform parliamentarians of what is going on, if they're unable to do so because of the sensitivity of the material in front of them, because of the situation, then that is okay, and that is something that the opposition should understand. He also said that politicians within the opposition bloc should understand this challenge and the position from which the government is approaching this challenge. Former Union Home Minister Chidambaram is also now the latest to not back the party's official narrative. Mr. Chidambaram, while speaking to a news daily, said that Rahul Gandhi had correctly asked the question about Jaishankar's remark informing Pakistan at the start of the operation, which subsequently the MEA clarified. But since the Ministry of External Affairs has given a detailed clarification, Mr. Chidambaram said that he didn't want to press this issue further. Unfortunately, though, Mr. Gandhi seems to be doubling down on that issue.
We'll have to be on the same page, and we will be on the same page, which all it says is for India and for India alone. Somebody, my party may ask questions that you went there to laud the BJP. Is that what you went there for? That's the challenge. And I have to tell my party leaders, please.
Well, it's not just Salman Khurshid. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, I spoke to him last week. He's been in hot water with his party right from the beginning of this conflict for his unequivocal support of the government. A few days after Operation Sindoor, I got a chance to sit down with Dr. Tharoor and I asked him why he's not towing the Congress's official line. This is what he had to say.
All right, one final word before we close this interview. You seem to be saying nice things about the government these days, and people are speculating that that's not necessarily, with political motives. Is it with political motives?
I speak for my country. I speak as an Indian. Zaka, whatever we all are, politically and otherwise, there is one identity that makes everything else possible. That makes it possible for you to be a journalist pursuing your profession. That makes it possible for me to be a politician pursuing my profession and winning votes. And that identity is that of India, guaranteed by the constitution you and I began talking about.
So you're not
joining? To my mind, my loyalty is to my country.
Meanwhile, Rahul Gandhi and others within the Congress party have accused Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, of leaking information to Pakistan that the Indian armed forces were about to attack some of the terrorist camps there, the terrorist bases. Now, there is an official clarification that's come through from the External Affairs Ministry taking that on. The Foreign Ministry has said in a statement first made on the 17th of May, making it clear that Dr. Jaishankar has stated that India had warned Pakistan at the start, which is clearly the early phase after Operation Sindoor's commencement. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri also informed parliamentarians of exactly that, the timeline and the sequence of events. He said this to the Standing Committee on External Affairs. And much before all of this happened, much before this entire controversy, the Director General Military Operations of the Indian Army, Lieutenant General Rajiv Ghai, had said that as per protocol, and this is military to military protocol, every time there is an escalation or use of force by one country against another sovereign, there has to be an attempt to reach out and communicate to the other sovereign as to why a military action was taken. And that was done so in the case of Operation Sindoor as well. In the immediate few minutes after 1:30 a.m. on the 7th of May, such a military log went from the Indian DGMO to his Pakistani counterpart. But the Pakistan side responded by saying that they will not accept it and they will strike back. Another thing that the Congress is persisting with is to know how many Indian fighter jets went down. On this issue, Air Marshal DG Operations A.K. Bharti last week said that currently India is in a combat scenario and details like how many air assets have been lost, which air assets have been lost, will only give an advantage to the adversary, and it will be revealed at a time when the defense forces are comfortable revealing that detail.
इस समय कोई राजनीति नहीं करनी चाहिए उनको, चाहे राहुल गांधी जी हो चाहे कोई और हो। अब ऑल पार्टी डेलीगेशन में भी उन्होंने राजनीति की, जो भी एक ठीक विषय नहीं था। और इस समय तो राजनीति ये तो करनी नहीं। किसके लिए पूछ रहे हैं, वो क्या पूछ रहे हैं? हमारी सेना कह रही है ना, उस पर विश्वास करो ना। जो पाकिस्तान के लोग बोल रहे हैं उन पे आप क्यों विश्वास कर रहे हो?
So I want to go across to Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP, and Ashpreet Kadyal is national spokesperson of the Congress party. Ashpreet, the problem is this, that look, opposition is well within its right to ask questions, some of the unanswered questions about Operation Sindoor, but there is a time, place and a platform where those questions need to be raised. More importantly, the quibble that your party has raised with, government has chosen certain nominees from the opposition, we didn't have a say, or our nominees were not chosen. What is wrong with choosing a Dr. Tharoor or a Salman Khurshid or an Amar Singh or a Manish Tiwari? They're all, after all, congressmen and women. So why not? They represent India's position on Operation Sindoor.
Yes. See, number one, Zaka, I'll start with an example. The Bharatiya Janata Party sought 4 names from us. We gave them 4 names. That was merely a pretense. That was merely for optics. That was merely for theatrics. After that, the Bharatiya Janata Party did what it has always been doing, bypass. They have been bypassing Supreme Court orders. They've been bypassing stakeholder consultation. They've been bypassing having parliament sessions, having discussions and debates. And this same thing has been done again now. They have bypassed the opposition's opinion, the opposition's take on this. And number 2, Zaka, CNN sought a spokesperson from the Bharatiya Janata Party. The Bharatiya Janata Party gave a spokesperson for today's debate. Now, if I were to say that no, a Shehzad Poonawala would have been more competent, or a Gaurav Bhatia would have been more competent, or a Sudhanshu Trivedi would have been more competent.
But that's not your place to say. I mean, it's for their party to decide who they send on a debate. And frankly, I think Sanju Verma is just as competent. I mean, what's the problem?
Zaka, and I agree with that. And I agree with that. It is not for me to say. And the same way, because it is for you. You asked for the name. BJP gave the name. The same way BJP asked us for 4 names. We gave 4 names. Yet they were all ignored. Yet they were not added into the list. And the name that was not there was added, number 1. Number 2.
So, one second. I mean, I know it's apples to oranges comparison. For the benefit of our viewers, let me just say this. Let me just say this to our viewers, that both in the case of the BJP and in the case of the Congress, media channels, including CNN News 18, ask for political party spokespersons. Even if we have a specific preference, ultimately the party decides who they want to give or do not want to give. It is not that the media channels insist on spokesperson A or spokesperson B. Ultimately, whoever is available, whoever wants to go on a particular topic, he or she is assigned by the party. So just to clarify that for our viewers. But be that as it may, the point, Ashpreet, is you're still not saying why you believe Dr. Tharoor or Mr. Khurshid or Mr. Amar Singh or Mr. Manish Tiwari, you believe are not the most articulate spokespersons of your party, or for that matter, spokespersons for India to put India's point of view across in these global capitals. Why?
Number 1, see, Zaka, The fact of the matter is that the democracy calls for inclusivity. It calls for this situation called for a united house. But the Bharatiya Janata Party chose a divided house. They chose politics over this, and we only want to say this thing, that opposition represents half of the country. You should have let the opposition has its say, because the fact of the matter is, just 10 seconds. My request to the Bharatiya Janata Party is that you have been ignoring a special parliament session because you are afraid of the questions. Mr. Modi did not attend the all-party meeting but went for a Bihar campaign rally. That's what your priority is. You have a Vijay Shah who's calling our sister, the daughter of the nation, a sister of terrorists. And after the FIR was registered, Mr. Modi hasn't even uttered a word over this. He has not been removed from the cabinet.
Let me ask Sanju Verma. Sanju Verma, to be fair, you know, you asked the opposition for names, the opposition gave some names, and you didn't take those names into consideration. It's not just the Congress, even the TMC had a problem, and finally you had to reach out to Mamata Banerjee, and she said, okay, let Abhishek Banerjee be the one who's representing the TMC. So more than one opposition party seems to have this view that they were not consulted before the names were announced.
You know, Zaka, before I come to your pertinent query, I just want to say on a lighter note, Zaka Jacob happens to be one of my favorite anchors. And Zaka, thank you so much for saying I'm as competent as anybody else. And Arshdeep, I'm going to be generous. I think you're highly competent as a Shama Mohammed or a Supriya Srinath. But now let's get to the, more serious part of the debate. The more serious part of the debate, Zaka, is this. You remember in 1994, when India had to send a delegation to the UNHRC at Geneva, the Prime Minister was Narasimha Rao. He chose Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He chose Farooq Abdullah, and he chose, Salman Khurshid. So the prerogative has always been with the political establishment of the day. In 2008, Manmohan Singh had to send an international delegation. The prerogative was entirely his. In 2025, Narendra Modi is the Prime Minister. The prerogative will most certainly be his. That is my point number one. My point number two, Shashi Tharoor was the Under Secretary General of Communications in the United Nations. He's been an MOS in the External Affairs Ministry. But more importantly, he's chosen to articulate what has happened via Operation Sindoor, putting aside his political affiliations. So why should the government not choose Shashi Tharoor? Point number three, which is the most important one. I think, Rahul Gandhi and Jairam Ramesh and Pawan Khera, with no offense to none, they seem to be missing the woods for the trees. Let's be very clear. Pakistan के टीवी चैनल्स पर राहुल गांधी, पवन खेरा, जयराम रमेश, विजय वडेट्टीवार, सिद्धारमैया, बीके हरि प्रसाद, Tariq Hamid Karra, these are all senior Congress leaders. They are being quoted gleefully by the Pakistani media because Rahul Gandhi seems to be reading out Zaka from Asim Munir's playbook. I want to ask the Congress one thing. Forget about the global, multi-party delegations that the Modi government is sending to Middle East and US and Europe, what have you. My simple point is this. When Operation Sindoor has still not stopped, we've said we've only paused, it is still very much underway. What was the need for the Congress to say, Indira Gandhi ban pana aasan nahi hai? So through your channel, Zaka, just 10 seconds.
Okay.
Ji haan, Indira Gandhi ban pana aasan nahi hai, because this is the same Indira Gandhi who handed over on a golden platter 93,000 POWs to Pakistan, caved into every ridiculous demand of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at the negotiating table in 1972. But lo behold, the same Indira Gandhi, the gutsy Indira Gandhi, supposedly could not get back 54 Indian POWs who were left to languish and rot in Pakistan. And Arshdeep, I have condemned Vijay Shah. Do you have the guts to condemn what your alliance partner Ram Gopal Yadav, Akhilesh Yadav's uncle, said about Wing Commander Vyomika Singh? He called her a chamar. Rahul Gandhi ke muh mein dahi jam gaya.
Okay, no, at the very least, can you condemn what Vijay Vadattiyar has been saying, what Mr. Ghulam Ahmed Mir has been saying? Mr. Kharge, senior leader as he is, Congress party president, says ye chutput operation hai. This can't be a chutput operation. India has redrawn the lines. Arshpreet, surely you understand this. And I don't know what happened, but certainly for the first 2-3 weeks after Pahalgam, the Congress, at least the leaders of the Congress, seem to be in unison with the government that, look, we are with the government in whatever decision, military action they take. Even after Sindoor happened on the 7th of May, the first initial position was, we are fully with the government on this. What happened in the last few days for the Congress to strike this rather discordant note?
Kindly allow me 2 minutes, uninterrupted, Zakka. First and foremost, Mr. Jaishankar said it in clear words. At the start of the operation, we gave a message to Pakistan that we are going to be striking on the terror basis. The main ingredient of an operation is the element of surprise. Why put our forces in harm's way, and why give this edge, this benefit to the Pakistan army? Number two, we want to ask you from the Bharatiya Janata Party that having a leader like Vijay Shah and that not expelling him from the cabinet is a problem. Not expelling him from the party membership is a problem. The HM, the PM being quiet is a problem. Number three, when we Zakka say, action, it's almost going to be a month's time, and the terrorists the main accused that carried out this dastardly attack are still at large. They ought to be nabbed at the soonest and ought to be given the most stringent of punishments. How long will the families have to wait? And I want to make one thing very clear. We salute the army, we commend the army, we have the highest of respect for them. And the criticism of the Bharatiya Janata Party is not the criticism of India. And when the Bharatiya Janata Party is appreciating, complimenting Dr. Tharoor, they might as well apologize for what Mr. Modi said about him back in the day. Wah kya girlfriend hai? 50 crore ki girlfriend.
Look, he himself has forgotten it. I don't think that's an issue that's relevant right now. But Sanju Verma, there is a relevant question that Ashpreet Kadiyal asked. Tomorrow is going to be exactly 1 month since Pahalgam. The fundamental question is, where are those 4 terrorists? Why have they not been nabbed, or why have they not been neutralized? That's the very least that is owed to the families of the victims.
Zakka, I will answer that question, but first let me say one thing very categorically for the benefit of your audience. Yahan baitkar Congress ke pravakta, they say, oh, we love our armed forces, we respect our armed forces. If you really respect the armed forces, why did you give Kanhaiya Kumar a ticket from Northeast Delhi? It's a different matter that he lost by almost 1,40,000 votes at the hands of, Manoj Tiwari. This is the same Kanhaiya Kumar who said Indian armed forces are rapists. ये बलात्कारी हैं, और आप कन्हैया कुमार को लोकसभा की टिकट देते हो. आपके शीला दीक्षित के बेटे संदीप दीक्षित had called Bipin Rawat, the late Bipin Rawat, सड़क का गुंडा. Has Rahul Gandhi expelled Sandeep Dixit? Has Rahul Gandhi expelled Kanhaiya Kumar? But Zakka, very quickly, please, just 30 seconds. 2016 surgical strike. We crossed the LOC.
Yeah.
It was one of its kind operation. The Congress, Rahul Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, and the entire cabal, they never appreciated the armed forces of Prime Minister Modi. 2019, we did even better. Via the Balakot strike, forget crossing LOC, we crossed the international border. Rahul Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi और इनकी पूरी जमात के मुंह में दही जम गया. And lo behold, 2025, forget crossing POK, LOC or the international border, Zakka. We struck at the heart of Pakistani military headquarters at Rawalpindi. Show me another country which in less than 23 hours has brought down to its knees a nuclear power. Because don't forget, Pakistan is a nuclear power. And coming back to those 4 people, Shahid Kutte, who is the head of the resistance front, which is an offshoot of the Lashkar Taiba, was neutralized by way of Operation Keller. The mastermind of Pahalgam terror attack, Asif Sheikh, Adnan Shafi Dar, they were neutralized. Yes, we have to neutralize those 4, but 4 of the masterminds, Adnan Shafi Dar, Asim Munir,
very quickly, Ashpreet, final word. Yeah, 30 seconds. I got to wrap up quickly after this.
Thank you.
30 seconds.
Thank you. See, one is that the reason as to why we have been requesting for a special parliament session is because we want to know why did the US give this ultimatum to us that if you have a ceasefire, there will be trade. If you won't have a ceasefire, there will be no trade. Number 2, have you opened the doors to diplomacy and US? Have you invited them for diplomacy over the issue of Kashmir as well? This is another question. Number 3, India is recalling Indira Gandhi ji because in 1971, within 4 days of the word that
Indira Gandhi did not even give pension to Sam
Pakistan surrendered. In 1965, our army went to the Lahore's doorstep and a
She
message was
deprived
conveyed that
some
India.
All right,
Minister of
I'm going to call it time. I'm going to call it time on this quick face-off at the top. But like I said, it's come at an inopportune time that just as our parliamentary delegations, and it's a good sign. The sign of a mature democracy is that both government members, ruling party members that is, and also opposition members are part of these various delegations. 50-odd members are going to 30-odd countries and trying to put forth India's point of view in a bipartisan, non-political kind of way that, look, this is why India did what it did, and to try and wrest back some of the narrative which Pakistan claims it has managed to equanimate between India and Pakistan through the course of Operation Sindoor. But I want to move on to now the other big story, what is happening on the other side of the border in Pakistan. Look, there's a big development that's happened over the last 24 hours, at the core of which Pakistan is a military-dominated state, no matter the fact that a civilian government runs the show there, at least on paper. That fact has now been further cemented with the recent elevation of General Asim Munir from Chief of Army Staff. He now becomes Field Marshal. This is a new 5-star rank which effectively places General Munir at the very top, at the very apex of Pakistan's military-civil power structure. The only other recipient, there are only two in the 75-year history of Pakistan, there are only two Field Marshal recipients. The only other recipient of this rank, this 5-star general status, was General Ayub Khan, who was also the architect of Pakistan's first successful military coup in 1958. He first co-opted the then president of Pakistan, Iskandar Mirza. Ayub Khan then imposed martial law in Pakistan, and soon after he did that, he ousted Iskandar Mirza and then went on to become the de facto ruler, the president of Pakistan. And the following year, in 1959, he awarded himself the rank of Field Marshal. Now, this set a precedent for military rule. It normalized the intervention of the army in civilian governance. So what does this elevation, after 70 plus years now, the elevation of General Munir from Chief of Army Staff, which is a position that he'll continue to occupy because Pakistan so far has not shown any inclination of naming anyone else as Chief of Army Staff, but rank-wise he goes from General to now Field Marshal. What does this mean for Pakistan and how will this affect India? Here's a deep dive into what are the implications of this move.
The most powerful man in Pakistan doesn't sit in parliament. He doesn't campaign. He doesn't answer to the public. He wears a uniform and now he wears 5 stars. General Asim Munir has been promoted to Field Marshal, the highest rank in Pakistan's military hierarchy. Only one man before him ever held that title, Ayub Khan, Pakistan's first military dictator. A Field Marshal in Pakistan doesn't retire and stays on the active list for life. He outlasts governments, escapes scrutiny, and he never has to give up control. Munir's promotion came after Pakistan's air bases were struck by Indian missiles. It came after Operation Sindoor exposed Pakistan's terror infrastructure and neutralized its drone and missile strikes. Yet, Munir was rewarded. The rank of Field Marshal gives Munir 2 things: lifelong authority and immunity from future prosecution. He can't be court-martialed after retirement, he doesn't answer to parliament, no future government can legally touch him. It's a military shield disguised as a ceremonial crown. Munir isn't just a general. He's a Hafiz-e-Quran, a deeply religious man raised in Rawalpindi's Islamic seminaries. He invoked the two-nation theory in public. He called Kashmir Pakistan's jugular vein. He's a military commander with a missionary zeal. And just days before the Pahalgam massacre in Kashmir, Munir gave a speech that many in the Indian intelligence believe emboldened the Lashkar-e-Taiba to kill 26 tourists. His rise, though, wasn't smooth. He was removed as the ISI chief in 2019 after clashing with Imran Khan. He re-emerged in 2022 as the army chief after Imran Khan's fall. Then in 2024, his tenure was quietly extended from 3 to 5 years. And now in 2025, he becomes the first serving army chief to be made Field Marshal. Ayub Khan took the same path in 1959 and Pakistan slid into dictatorship soon after. Munir's promotion wasn't voted on. It wasn't debated in Parliament. It was rubber-stamped by a government desperate to stay afloat. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said the decision to make Munir a Field Marshal was his. He didn't need tanks on the streets or martial law. He already controls the state. Military courts, media censorship, foreign policy and political suppression. Munir rules while the rest obey. Sources say Beijing is backing Munir's consolidation of power. This may be the case because a militarized, anti-India Pakistan is useful to China. It forces India to split focus across the Himalayas and the line of control. Munir's hardline rhetoric and jihadist proxies serve China's strategic depth. And with 80% of Pakistan's weapons supplied by China, the equation is clear. Social media in Pakistan is flooded with one phrase, Field Marshal. Memes mock his retreat to bunkers during India strikes. Many say he even promoted himself. While this may seem like a promotion, it is in fact protection. Protection from accountability, from the opposition, and protection from consequences.
All right, I want to try and get some military perspective into this. Air Chief Marshal retired S. Krishnaswamy is former Chief of Air Staff of the Indian Air Force. Thank you very much, Air Chief Marshal, for speaking with us. In plain speak, in layman language, what does the elevation of a sitting army chief to Field Marshal rank, what does it mean?
It's obviously pre-planned, and it is to protect his so-called position and the power, and that he can, he's not answerable to anybody now. And this has been obviously planned very systematically and executed. So let it be. So we're not impressed.
But generally, in the history of Pakistan, there were only two, this being the second. Even in the history of Indian Army, there's only been two Field Marshals. And it has generally been after, in the case of, for example, Field Marshal Manekshaw, it was after the 1971 war. In the case of the British and the US armies, it's always been granted to generals who've, had a stellar role in battles. In this case, he was a failure in responding to Operation Sindoor. So this is like rewarding failure.
It is very funny, really. We can't compare Field Marshal Manekshaw to this guy. This is just he's a rabble-rouser, and in 3 days, and he couldn't withstand the so-called attacks from India, and so soon, against a very, very planned affair. And nevertheless, and they don't want to fight. And it's obviously focused on his own so-called grandeur plan, and that plan is now set in motion.
So I want to know.
It doesn't impress us anyway.
Two things that could play out in the next few days. One is the question that's being asked is, this is perhaps the first time that somebody is both Field Marshal and Chief of Army Staff. Is that a tenable continuance, or will eventually they'll have to find a new Chief of Army Staff? And in the power structure, how does that fit in? I mean, can a Field Marshal and a Chief of Army Staff continue to function, continue to operate, or if there is going to be a new Chief of Army Staff, who I presume would be a 4-star general, would he or she then have to report into this Field Marshal?
In Pakistan's case, there is no reporting structure. He is all in all, he can wear any rank. He's been a general. I think it is to do with this judiciary and their political power, that a Field Marshal per se is beyond any kind of question as an authority as compared to a general, a 4-star of Chief of Army Staff. So he made himself a Field Marshal to have that power. As far as managing the forces, it remains the same. And after all, we know that who matter there are the corps commanders, and they're all in place, and the generals are all in their, in their respective, shelters. And he still commands. Whether he's Field Marshal or a general, it doesn't make a difference.
One final word. So you're saying this is more a political move to try and get him immunity? Because, let's face it, he has been daggers drawn publicly against Imran Khan. And in politics, you never know what's going to happen. So if in the event, in the future, Imran Khan and his party make a comeback, this is General Munir's way of giving himself some kind of immunity?
So let us watch the fun. It's obviously there can't be anything more than that or better than that. He's going to stay in power whether they get bashed. One of the things that had happened is the way that India struck Pakistan and the damage caused, that had shaken him up very quickly. Before he loses any, there are many people questioning Munir on whether he did the right thing. Before it gets any further, what should I say, brings him into answerability. So he quickly protects himself to declare himself the Field Marshal, and he is above any law in that country.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
He's done it very quickly because of that.
Air Chief Marshal S. Krishnaswamy, thank you so much for joining us and putting that issue into perspective for our viewers. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's look at the big picture. It's going to be exactly 2 weeks today since Operation Sindoor happened. In response to the Pahalgam terror attack, India launched a one-of-its-kind operation involving Army, Navy and Air Force. The initial target was terrorist infrastructure, and then later on it escalated into military sites in Pakistan. This action, coupled with what we saw in 2016, the first surgical strikes, which were publicly claimed, then the 2019 Balakot airstrikes, it signifies that India is bringing into force a new normal in its relationship with Pakistan. India is attempting to establish a stronger deterrence for Pakistan and its strategy and its track record of using terror proxies. So how has India systematically achieved this new normal? How has it redrawn these new red lines? So far, India's policy for the last 30 years vis-a-vis Pakistan and Pakistan-sponsored terrorism was called strategic restraint. Now there is a new doctrine that India has written in the aftermath of Operation Sindoor, and through Operation Sindoor, from strategic restraint, India has moved to active deterrence. I dig a little deeper to find out. On a quiet night on the 7th of May, Indian Armed Forces carried out a precision military operation across the line of control and the international border, codenamed Operation Sindoor. The mission was swift, lethal and calibrated. But its significance lies not just in what was destroyed, but in what it signaled to Pakistan and to the rest of the world. For decades, India and Pakistan have been locked in a cycle. From time to time, there's a terrorist attack on Indian soil that is followed by international condemnation. There's a flurry of diplomatic activity. Sometimes there is a punitive reprisal, and always it is followed by a return to the status quo. And then the cycle repeats itself. In 2016, India responded to the Uri attack with surgical strikes. In 2019, Balakot became a turning point when Indian jets crossed the Lakshman Rekha and hit deep inside mainland Pakistan, outside of Kashmir. But even those actions, bold as they were, left one question unanswered. Would the threshold of tolerance ever change? Has India enforced the rules of deterrence vis-a-vis Pakistan and Pakistan-sponsored terrorism? With Operation Sindoor, the answer to that question seems to be yes. India has redrawn the rules. The unwritten rules of engagement between India and Pakistan for many decades now have revolved around plausible deniability. So long as Pakistan could avoid any direct conventional warfare and relied instead on its terror proxies like the Lashkar and the Jaish, it could wage this shadow war without triggering a full-blown response. So terror attacks were treated like actions of non-state actors. The diplomatic song and dance that would follow suited both sides. India could avoid escalation, Pakistan could continue bleeding India by 1,000 cuts. This framework was never really formal between both countries, but it had endured for 30 years. Balakot cracked that framework. Sindoor may have finally broken that framework open. Unlike previous responses, Operation Sindoor went beyond retaliating for just one single act of terror. That one single act was Pahalgam, but Operation Sindoor targeted not just the foot soldiers of cross-border terrorism, but also the infrastructure behind terrorism. Staging grounds, communication hubs, even terror facilities that are adjacent to military protection. Sites like Bahawalpur and Muridke, which are the headquarters of the Jaish and the Lashkar respectively, are next to sprawling military installations. In the past, this would give them a degree of immunity. Not anymore. That level of risk-taking signals a shift in India's military doctrine. India appears to be moving from a policy of strategic restraint to one of active deterrence. In simple terms, India is no longer waiting for these terror attacks to happen. It is declaring that the very act of preparing or enabling terrorism, even if it is by covert means, will be met with real consequences. It is not going to make a distinction between state and non-state actors. Even state actors will be punished for the acts of their non-state brethren.
हम आतंक की सरपरस्त सरकार और आतंक के आकाओं को अलग अलग नहीं देखेंगे। ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के दौरान दुनिया ने पाकिस्तान का वो घिनौना सच फिर देखा है, जब मारे गए आतंकियों को विदाई देने पाकिस्तानी सेना के बड़े बड़े अफसर उमड़ पड़े। स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड टेररिज्म का ये बहुत बड़ा सबूत है।
But a red line is only meaningful if a country can enforce that red line. What Operation Sindoor illustrates is India's willingness to do exactly that. By redrawing boundaries in a volatile neighborhood, it's not going to be without a cost. Pakistan, for its part, reacted with a lot of bluster. As expected, it sent in swarms of drones, followed by missiles and aircraft. It is to India's credit, the air defenses proved to be very, very successful against these intruders, that none of those missiles or projectiles or drones was successful. But there was a sudden climbing off the escalation ladder after Pakistan Army Chief General Asim Munir realized on the morning of the 10th of May that India had damaged a dozen of his frontline air bases. At least 2 of them were rendered unusable. Munir realized that he could not win this by climbing the escalation ladder. There was only one way, and that was to get off the ladder. The way was to de-escalate. Thereby, what India managed to do was to get Munir and the Pakistan Army to obey India's red line. India was enforcing a new military doctrine. This suggests that Operation Sindoor may have achieved what no diplomatic maneuver has ever been able to achieve so far. Operation Sindoor has now introduced the element of uncertainty into Pakistan's cost-benefit calculus. For a military establishment in Pakistan that is used to operating below the threshold of open conflict, the prospect of losing control of the escalation ladder, or even worse, of inviting disproportionate retribution, completely changes the game, completely changes the security and strategic calculus. So how will India enforce these new red lines going forward? The answer lies not just in military readiness, but also in a broader national security architecture. Sindoor involved not just missiles and fighter jet capabilities, but also drone surveillance, cyber capabilities, electronic warfare, and real-time satellite intelligence. This multi-domain approach points to a future where deterrence is going to be not just about putting boots on the ground, it's also about controlling algorithms up in the cloud. It is tempting to believe that a single operation, in this case Operation Sindoor, and however bold it was, can fundamentally alter Pakistan's long-standing strategic calculus. That would be naive. Pakistan's reliance on asymmetric warfare is deeply embedded in its military doctrine. The strategic utility of non-state actors, particularly in Kashmir, is still very high. However, what may be changing is the confidence, and some would say impunity, with which these terror attacks used to happen in India on a regular basis. With Operation Sindoor, India has made it clear that this grey zone of plausible deniability is shrinking. Plausible deniability no longer offers protection to Pakistani state players. So safe havens may no longer be safe. Pakistan also has a lot of internal dynamics which it needs to consider. Pakistan is going through a massive economic crisis, multiple bailouts by the IMF and the World Bank. There is political instability. There's also international isolation, all of which limits its bandwidth the next time there is escalation with India. It may well choose to absorb the blow right now and regroup again and inflict another terror attack at a later point of time. However, it may also seek newer and subtler forms of provocation, including cyber attacks, targeted disinformation campaigns, even proxy sabotage. One of the most intriguing aspects of how this crisis eventually de-escalated and how quickly it managed to de-escalate, within 4 days, the dust settled. The ceasefire, however tenuous, is still holding. It's been a week plus now since it's been holding. Both sides are holding off fire, at least temporarily, at least for now. Peace, or the absence of war, has returned quickly and returned abruptly. The timing and manner of de-escalation suggests that there could have been some form of back-channel communication, although India firmly denies any third-party role, including that of the United States, despite US President Trump, in multiple social media posts and also in sound bites, claiming that it was the US that mediated and intervened between India and Pakistan. Operation Sindoor may be remembered as the operation that redefined India's red lines. But drawing new red lines is just the beginning. The real test will lie when those red lines are tested again. Will India impose even further costs? Will it hit not just terror targets but also strategic locations deep inside Pakistan, going beyond the remit of Kashmir? Future provocations will challenge India to respond consistently, credibly, and proportionately. The danger lies not in escalating, but in how to control the escalation. Deterrence works best when the consequences of deterrence are clear and visible to the enemy. For now, one thing is amply clear. India has moved past the era of silent endurance, or what some call strategic restraint. India has chosen to speak through action and not words, and in doing so, it has changed the rules of the game. India is now enforcing active deterrence. Meanwhile, some other domestic news. In a month after the protests against the Waqf Amendment Act turned violent in West Bengal's Murshidabad, the Calcutta High Court appointed 3-member panel found that the local police there were inactive and they were absent during the mob violence. Significant damage was reported then, including the destruction of 100+ houses in Betpuna village and the looting of shops and malls in and around that area. The violence had led to the deaths of Hargobind Das and his son Chandan Das, who were both stabbed by neighbors amidst the unrest. Here's what the Calcutta High Court panel's investigation has revealed. The local police were completely inactive and absent throughout the incident. Shopping malls were looted and shut down. Grocery stores, hardware shops, electrical and textile outlets, along with essential personal documents, were destroyed. Temples belonging to residents were also desecrated. Kerosene oil was used to burn clothing, and in some cases, women were left without clothes to cover themselves. The barbarity of the violence was such that even water connections were deliberately cut by miscreants to prevent the extinguishing of fires. Local councillor Mehboob Alam reportedly accompanied the miscreants on the 11th of April. A man named Amirul Islam returned to the village, identified the houses that had not been attacked, and shortly afterward, those houses were also set on fire. The MLA was present on Friday, witnessed the vandalism, did nothing to stop it. With the police completely failing the people of Murshidabad, residents have demanded permanent BSF camps and deployment of Central Armed Paramilitary Forces for their protection. In fact, the report also says that the majority of residents there had taken shelter in Malda, which is the neighboring district. Some of them had to swim across a river, but they were forcibly sent back by the local administration.
न्यायालय द्वारा गठित SIT की रिपोर्ट आने के बाद पश्चिम बंगाल की तृणमूल कांग्रेस सरकार की हिंदू विरोधी निर्ममता अपने पूरे विद्रूप रूप में सामने आती हुई दिखाई पड़ रही है।
मुर्शिदाबाद लेकर बीजेपी डार्टी पॉलिटिक्स कर रहे हैं। ये जो रिपोर्ट है ये कंप्लीट है या नहीं है, ये हमारा लीडरशिप एनालाइज करने के बाद हम लोग बताएंगे।
And finally, negotiations are on between the United States and Iran to reach a nuclear deal During his recent three-nation trip to the Middle East, where President Trump reached Saudi Arabia, UAE and Qatar, he made it seem like an agreement was already in the works, but that's not quite the case. Both sides are warning each other over nuclear enrichment, which has been the bone of contention between Tehran and Washington for a number of years now. It's the very same deal that Trump pulled out of in 2018. So why is he now so eager to broker that very same deal, or will it hit an impasse? I decode further.
America is back.
US President Donald Trump has made it clear that he wants to do a deal with Iran over its nuclear program and avoid a war in the Middle East. This has left America's closest ally in the Gulf, Israel, out in the cold. But Trump is pushing through. His recent trip to the Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Qatar, underlined this conviction. When Iran first agreed in 2015 to limit its nuclear program after years of negotiations with 6 world powers, including the United States, back then, these Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE and others, saw Iran as a dangerous adversary. They worked for a number of years to try and isolate Iran. It was perhaps the only common cause that they could find with Israel. But today, those same Gulf leaders have been making their own rapprochement with Iran. They want to avoid further instability and broader conflict in the Middle East. And a prime example of this is Saudi Arabia, which was Donald Trump's first stop in a three-nation Gulf tour last week. At every stop in that three-nation tour, Arab leaders urged Trump to find a negotiated settlement with Iran. Iran, whether it acquires a bomb, and as a consequence, if Iran is going to be bombed by the United States, both have a serious fallout for the region. Reaching a deal with Iran will test the hardline wing of Trump's supporters in the Republican Party as well, and whether or not they will fall in line with the president. For them, if that happens, it would be a departure from their long-standing demand that Iran completely dismantle its nuclear program. In fact, just last week, more than 200 congressional Republicans, both from the Senate and the House, urged Donald Trump in an open letter that they signed, to stand firm against Iran. The United States and its partners in the Middle East fear that a nuclear-armed Iran could set off a nuclear arms race in the Middle East and contribute to instability. And therefore, that would sharply raise the stakes for any kind of miscalculation either between Israel and Iran or between Iran and some of its major Gulf rivals. American officials speak positively about the progress in the talks between the US and Iran. These talks are being led by Trump's chief negotiator and Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. The president, in fact, last week said that Witkoff had given Iran an outline for a deal and pressed Tehran to respond to it. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, who is the points person from the Iranian government, he later denied that there was any such written proposal from the United States, either directly or indirectly. And later, that led to a full-blown war of words between Mr. Witkoff, Trump's Middle East envoy, and Mr. Araghchi, who is Iran's foreign minister and the public face of its negotiations with America over the nuclear deal. The public comments by both parties belie the 4 rounds of talks that have already happened. These were mediated by Oman, which happens to be one of Saudi Arabia's closest partners in the region. Nonetheless, there are significant gaps between the two sides. Trump continues to insist that Iran must halt all the enrichment of uranium, whether it fuels civilian nuclear energy or whether it is used for nuclear weapons. Israel and some of Trump's most fervent supporters are pushing for this outcome. Iran, on the other hand, continues to insist that it will not stop enriching uranium altogether and that it has a right to enrichment of nuclear energy for civilian purposes under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT, which Iran has signed. Iranian officials have said that they would be willing to stop enrichment at the higher levels that are used for nuclear weapons, which exceed the requirements for civilian nuclear use. They have also said they're willing to scrap their large stockpile of highly enriched uranium, in fact, even suggesting that Russia should keep Iran's highly enriched uranium. But Iran is very clear they are not going to stop enriching uranium entirely. Ali Shamkhani, who's a top advisor to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, repeated Iran's position to NBC News. Trump shared that article on Truth Social without offering any comment, and that was perhaps a signal that Trump is giving his tacit approval to this plan. But those concessions were effectively the same as what Iran agreed to in 2015, in the first deal that was signed between Iran and 6 countries. In return, what Iran got was relief from crippling economic sanctions. Trump despised that agreement. He felt that it was too much of a giveaway. It was negotiated by his predecessor, President Barack Obama. And then in his first term, Trump forced the United States to withdraw from that Iran deal in 2018, and then he once again resumed sanctions on Tehran. But currently, President Masoud Pezeshkian of Iran, he has reiterated his country's commitment to negotiating and an unwillingness to concede the right to civilian enrichment. Uranium needs to be enriched to more than 90% to make it weapons grade. Iran has got to about 60% enriched uranium, and the estimate seems to be it can reach weapons grade enrichment within weeks, if not months. So the ideas on a possible US-Iran deal include a long-term freeze on Iranian enrichment under enhanced international inspection. For this, the IAEA as well as other associated bodies will need to be brought in. Another idea would be for Iran to agree to phase out its enrichment program over a period of time if it is assured that they can have a reliable supply chain of nuclear fuel on the global market. That might satisfy Trump, signaling that Iran had not rejected the idea of ending its uranium enrichment at some point in the future. The sanctions that have battered Iran and that its leaders so badly want to be lifted could also be removed in phases. American corporate investment in Iran could be designed to enhance long-term trust and provide some kind of a deterrence against another war breaking out in the Middle East. But Iran was once bitten and therefore twice shy. It has been stung once by Trump's unilateral withdrawal in 2018 from the previous deal. Iran will now want guarantees that the United States will adhere to a new deal if at all both the US and Iran are able to arrive at one. Iranian officials seem to believe, and not without reason, that Trump as a Republican president would be better placed to guarantee a deal than a Democrat, particularly because it would be bilateral between Iran and the US and not among multiple nations like the 2015 agreement was. So effectively, they have another 3.5 years under Trump 2.0 to get this deal done. Iranians are also likely to take some encouragement from Trump's announcement last week to lift sanctions against Syria's new leader despite his terrorist past. Though the president can lift some sanctions on his own, other lifting of sanctions require congressional approval. Trump, in that trip, controversially met with Syria's new leader, Ahmad al-Sharaa, despite the fact that until some months ago, he was heading an al-Qaeda wing in his country and had a $10 million bounty on his head. Trump faces opposition to an Iran deal from those within his camp, particularly neoconservatives on Capitol Hill, who have cheered his withdrawal from the earlier deal in 2018. One of those neocons happens to be his Secretary of State, the other his Vice President. They have long demanded that Iran agree to complete denuclearization, a ban on all enrichment, and the dismantling of its massive nuclear infrastructure. Iran is non-committal yet. Trump, the master of deal-making, will have to bring his full weight to bear on this one.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Jai Hind. Thank you for your time.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Thank you for having me, Anand.
So, how do we deal with this? Now, this is the input coming through. The Kartarpur Sahib corridor is a matter of religious pilgrimage. We can't go back and alter history, because had that line been just 1.5 kilometers on the other side, we wouldn't have had this problem also. But now we are faced with this issue. And in the recent spurt of the number of people who are now being unearthed as part of the spy ring cultivated by the ISI, this becomes concerning.
Anand, yeah, it's a very good point, but I would like to add that this corridor was opened on 9th of November 2019. But the spy rings were working before that also.
Ji.
Secondly, you will find that since having knowledge of law and order, intelligence, and having worked in various fields of the state police as an IPS officer, I know that such places are for mutual exchange of intelligence. It is not that it is always a negative point for us. Our intelligence agencies, whether it is RAW, IB, state counterintelligence agencies, It's like a place. For example, if you look at Red Cross, or you will find that all these places are good breeding grounds, but it can be beneficial both ways. So I don't want to go into those details.
Right.
But just imagine that since November 2019, around 4,14,435 people have visited this Gurdwara Sahib, Kartarpur Sahib. Out of that, maybe 10, 20, you will find that we can say that, not that I only know about 2 people which have been identified, including Jyoti Malhotra and one from Haryana and maybe one from Punjab. The percentage of such people is very low. I also want to add one more thing, that Jyoti Malhotra only once went to Kartarpur Sahib, but twice she went to Pakistan via Atari border.
Yeah.
So this exchange of visitors is okay, but at the same time, I don't want to deny that whether it is on this side or that side of the border, we need to be very alert on these issues. And now in present day world, when we have like social media platforms, we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, it is very easy for our intelligence agencies also to monitor as to what the other person is doing. And I feel that it is like, for example, if there is 40,000 people sitting in one stadium,
right,
and they all have mobile phones, for intelligence agencies of ours, as we are very technically advanced, no doubt about that,
right,
and I have seen how we work, it's not difficult for us to identify who are the black sheeps or who are working for the foreign this thing. Now these have been identified. I think they have been located, pinpointed, because I feel that during Operation Sindoor, our intelligence agencies, they worked proactively and they could identify these. So therefore, what we need to do is that instead of causing obstructions, because I know there are elements on both sides of the nation who don't want to eliminate the political credit which somebody can drive on other side or this side. Because it's a very important religious place where Guru Nanak Sahib stayed for 18 years of the last. He came there in 1429 and he left this world in 1539, 1521. So 18 years he stayed there and he spread the message of Kirti Karna, Naam Japna and Van Shakna. And at the time of his passing away, both the sides, Muslims and Sikhs, both wanted that he is their teacher or God or Guru. So they both wanted to cremate as per their rites. So you imagine that is the place where there are about 15 feet apart, 2 burial places, one by Sikh rites and other by Muslim rites. And they are very near to each other. But at the same time, coming back to the internal security issues and intelligence agents or spies, which can be incorporated, it is typically a both-way exchange. But at the same time, what we need to do is we need to activate our proactively be active so that we identify. Because Anand, I would like to add one more thing before your other panelists come, that out of 5,936 people who applied, 4,14,435 is visited. And now it is only intelligence agency can say how many of them were indoctrinated as the spies of the foreign agency.
Got it. No, I get your point. You're making a point. But thing is, sir, in their case, with the enemy is concerned.
Viewers, today was a very consequential day in the Supreme Court. A very big development with big national security implications. Viewers, I've been telling you for a while that a dangerous conflict is not just brewing at our borders, but deep within the nation's mindscape. As India confronts the overt threats posed by hostile neighbors China and Pakistan, another front has opened up at home. A war fought not with weapons, but of narratives. Who's saying this, viewers? No less than the Supreme Court. That's right. Today, the top court called out Ashoka University professor Ali Khan Mahbubabad